Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to Whimsical and Interesting Musings, and today I'm going to be talking about the television series Inside Number 9, written and performed by Steve Pimpleton and Reese Shearsmith. So the show is basically structured as an anthology, meaning that each episode is its own self-contained story with a beginning, middle and end. Each story has a particular setup, but each story, as you start to unravel the narrative, begins to have a few twists and turns here and there. Some episodes are fairly straightforward and they have certain twists in the tale, but others are just straightforward slice of life stories. Let's say, for example, there is an episode in the second series called The 12 Days of Christine, and it's basically just a story about one woman's essential life from one period in time to the other. Yes, there is a twist in this one, but there's a lot of drama and there's very little laughs to be had. And for those of you who don't know, Steve Pembleton and Reese Shearsmith were a somewhat, interesting comedic duo because they did previously work on another series which I really loved called Psychoville, which follows a group of ex mental patients who get a mysterious letter back saying that we know what you did, and they have to try to figure out what this all means. And the whole entirety of Psychoville was a mystery connecting these two seemingly unrelated characters. It was one of Daniel Kaluuya's first ever starring roles, who is the main star in Get Out, and he is bloody gorgeous. So yeah, he got his start in that show, and I absolutely just love it. I love how he interacts with these characters and how he basically works off of them. And he's probably thinking to himself, my God, I should not be in this show. But he really is a good sport, and he really just shows how much of a good character he is. So instead of basically just going through every episode bit by bit by bit, I'm going to give you my top 5 favourite Inside Number 9 episodes, and I will be doing one per series. So the first one that I am choosing on this particular list is called A Quiet Night In. This entire episode is a unique episode because not only is it the second episode of this award-winning and fabulous series, but it's also a very quiet episode, meaning that there's very few lines of dialogue spoken, although there is sound and there is sound effects, but for the most part there's no dialogue spoken, and the majority of the stuff that is basically going on in this particular episode is pretty much all silent, and it follows a group of two burglars who are trying to steal a priceless work of art and try to sell it on the black market. But their attempts go a little bit haywire when the residents of this particular house that they're stealing this particular piece of artwork from start to have problems of their own, and there's a little bit of a domestic dispute going on between this couple that's going on. And it's a bloody good episode, if you pardon my French. It's a fantastic idea. It's such a great premise. Steve Pembleton and Reese Shearsmith are absolute, treasure to watch. They are hilarious. But not only that, they really do know how to really give you a lot of great twists and turns with this episode. It's a fabulous second outing of this series, and that's my number 5 spot. My second story for Inside Number 9 is from season 2, and it is the 12 Days of Christine. This particular story stars Sheridan Smith, and she plays a woman by the name of Christine Clark, and she is a woman who has a very interesting life, and her entire life, her ups and downs, her heartaches, her triumphs, are all pretty much catalogued through a 12-day period, and each day is marked by a specific holiday. Like, say, for example, the first day is New Year's Eve, and the second day is Valentine's Day, marking what we think is going to be marking a relationship then turns into a full life. We have her give birth, we have her experience loss, we have her experience terrible breakups, we have her experience trauma, we have her experience, revival and triumph. There's all sorts of things going on, but the real heart of what makes this episode so incredible is the build up to an amazing twist, which I didn't even see coming. And I literally had my own theories about what the twist was going to be. But luckily, Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith, you cheeky devils, you were able to really fool me and make me think, oh, crap, I did not see that coming at all. So yeah, my fourth option is going to be the 12 Days of Christine. My third is going to be a story from season 3 called The Bill, which is about a group of men who are trying to settle a bill. And they're not trying to settle who's going to pay it, and none of them are trying to work their way out of paying it or trying to get their way out of paying it, as most people would do. They're kind of arguing about who should pay it first, and that's where the real comedy of this episode comes in, because honestly, I did not think it was going to get this bad. But what's very incredible about this particular episode is you just do not know what's going to happen, and it is an incredible example of basically just having these four characters sitting in a restaurant trying to figure out who's going to pay this damn bill, and it's really hilarious. And chances are I've probably got this particular entry wrong, but I'm going to put this one on the list because I think it's an incredible example of how Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith can use dialogue to really heighten the stakes and to really make you think, where the hell is this going to go? Like, what's going to happen with these characters? Excuse me, my mouth's very dry. What's going to happen with these characters and how are they going to get out of this situation? It's an incredible episode, and that's my number 4. My next entry is going to be a story called, I've forgotten which season this is from. I think it's called Empty Orchestra. It basically just follows a group of friends who are, well, they're basically work colleagues. They work at an office, and they are having a karaoke evening, and they are basically just having fun, and they're trying to enjoy themselves, have a good time, but they know that deep down someone is going to get sacked by the end of the evening. The majority of the episode's plot is told primarily through songs on a karaoke, and that's the basic premise of this particular episode. But it really is a nice episode. A lot of Inside Number 9's episodes, while they are funny and they really do have a lot of, great moments, they can be very emotional episodes, like I said with the 12 Days of Christine and various other episodes to that effect, and they can be quite dark and sinister. So it was a breath of fresh air to see an episode like this, where the majority of it is told in one room, and it follows a cast of characters. Not all of them are likable, but a lot of them are, and they really have had a tough time of it. And the romance between Dwayne and Janet, who is a character who is deaf, and she's played by a deaf actress, which I thought was even more awesome for representation. But not only that, they really did a good job. Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton did a really good job of really kind of making sure that this character got the chance to get as much representation and get as much down about Janet's condition as possible. But not only that, but this romance between her and Dwayne, who is a guy who's dressed as Michael Jackson, and it's fancy dress, by the way. So all these characters are dressed up as various different people. Janet's dressed as Boy George. One character's dressed as Britney Spears. Another character's dressed as Amy Winehouse. And another character's dressed as Michael Jackson. Other characters are dressed as other things. But it's just these groups of people, and there's a lot going on here. But the way it's told through these karaoke stories, all these characters' reactions, all these characters' feelings are told through these songs. It's an incredible piece of work. The fact they're able to do that. There's a lot of musical episodes now, and I would definitely say in a shorthand kind of way that this is Inside Number 9's musical episode for sure, because it really does use music and songs in a way that really feels like it's telling an interesting story, or at least giving you an insight into these characters' emotions. And that's something that's very rarely done in a lot of musical episodes. Usually a lot of musical episodes would be very ambitious, and they would try to use songs that they themselves have written, or they'll try to do a spin on a musical or whatever, like Riverdale would, for example, and that's going to get its own video one day. I know a lot of people hate it, but I friggin' love it. That's my trash, so look forward to that at some point. Yeah, but to continue with In Summer of Night, this is a great episode, and I would highly recommend people watch it as a palate cleanser for all the other messed up crap that goes on in this show. My other entry is from all the way in series 7, called Wise Old Owl. This one is an absolute hellfire of emotions, because honestly, this episode really did kind of get me intrigued. When I first found out that they were going to do a riff on public information films, I was all ears, because to me, public information films are really terrifying, especially those from the 70s. Even though I didn't grow up in the 70s, I'm 27, by the way. When I first heard about these stories, I heard a lot about them through my mum and dad. My mum and dad grew up with a lot of public information films because they grew up in the 60s and they grew up in the 70s, essentially. And or they kind of were sort of in their teen years when they were in the 70s and 80s. So they had a lot of these particular public information films out there, and it clearly is riffing on things like Charlie Says and various other, public information films with animation at its core. But they do actually reference a lot of great, public information films, but they are really disturbing, and they really do show that the 70s was a very kind of gung-ho type of decade, wasn't it? Like, when people describe the 70s, they kind of always see it as very grimy and very gritty, and literally this is us doing our version of grimy and gritty, because we're always seen as very polite, aren't we British? So yeah, the fact that they actually managed to focus an entire episode on this idea, but the fact that it was literally meant to be a story of this guy's life, and at first you're thinking to yourself, oh, this is a character who is living life a little bit too cautiously in accordance with Wise Old Owl, as a lot of, kids from the 70s probably did. Like, they probably thought, oh, well, I'm going to do what Donald Pleasance says and dark and lonely water and not go near ponds or something like that. But this is a great episode. Not only is the storyline interesting, but it has, again, like with stereotypical Inside Number 9, it has a lot of great twists and turns, and you don't see where it's going. So that is my second piece. And I also want to give a shout out before I go to number 1 to a couple of other episodes which I really enjoyed. One of which is called Private Viewing. It's basically an episode about a group of people who seemingly don't know each other. They get invited to the last exhibition of an ambitious young artist who sadly passed away recently. And all the while they are at this exhibition, this very private exhibition, they are being picked off by a mysterious killer. And what is the killer's motive? Why is he doing all these terrible things? Well, you'll have to watch the episode to find out. This episode, even though technically it's not, probably Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton will probably say, something like, oh, we'd never even heard of the Italian horror genre. I'm pretty sure they have seen Italian horror films like Suspiria or Profondo Rosso or something like that, but I got this very keen feeling that they probably watched a lot of those in preparation for this film, because you can see the black-gloved killer with the razor, which is obviously a reference to Tenebrae, and a lot of other Giallo films. But this was a great episode. It was really fun. It was really funny as well. There was a lot of times where I found myself actually laughing, and I shouldn't have done. Like, there's a lot of really dark jokes in this, but I just love the twists and turns, and I love the dark humor, and I love Steve Hamilton and Reece Shearsmith. They're amazing. So this episode was really good, and the twist was really well done. It was kind of your standard, oh, who is the killer? But then they throw another twist into the mix, which I thought was very clever. So yeah, give this one a watch if you really want to. And I also want to give an honourable mention to another few episodes, one of which is called Love's Great Adventure, which basically stars a family in the build-up to Christmas. And This episode really broke my heart. Like the 12 Days of Christine, it really got me, thinking, wow, it came at me like a train. This particular episode did because family really does look out for each other, and it doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't matter what what crazy shit you put each other through. They'll always be with you, and they'll always be there for you in the end. Was such a comforting message in this episode. That doesn't always happen in real life, but often, because it was such an interesting change of pace from what we usually get. It's basically Empty Orchestra again, where they take an idea and they don't necessarily give it a lot of darkness or a lot of intensity, but they do give it, this great feeling of, overwhelming emotion and a sense of, this was really nice. And that's more than enough for me. And I really do think Love's Great Adventure is one that you should watch if you want to check out the series, because it just shows you the real emotional punches that Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith can give. So I would definitely give this one a watch if you're checking it out for the first time. I'll also recommend the episode Tom and Jerry, which is a episode which is basically a story about two people who are, one of whom is a tramp and the other one is a man who is trying to be a best-selling novelist. But when he comes into his life, everything starts to change. Like, he starts to miss work, he starts to stay in his home, and he begins to essentially go completely and utterly off the rails. And it's actually kind of a heartbreaking storyline to watch, because as someone who, if you're ever in a position where you're in a very low mood, which I've definitely been there once or twice in my life, I definitely can relate to something like this. Even though technically I haven't gotten as bad as Tom does in this particular episode, I do feel like it speaks to people who've ever had, those difficult moments where they feel like, they feel worthless or they feel down or they literally are. And I haven't actually gone through this, but it is definitely an interesting interpretation on depression and an interesting insight into depression. But I just felt like it was a really good episode, a really good study of that, and it's definitely a good episode. I would highly recommend it. It's one of the most well-written episodes of the first series, in my opinion. And these are all my opinions, by the way. And I'm sorry if your particular episode wasn't on the list. I will definitely, like to hear more people's opinions on what their favourite episode is. I definitely think it's a good idea. But another honourable mention that I will be giving a lot of attention to is a episode called The Devil of Christmas, which basically is a send-up of 1970s type TV shows and horror films. And this episode was actually really a lot of fun. I really liked it, and in true Inside Number 9 fashion, there is a horrible twist at the end of it, and this one was definitely horrible. I found myself thinking, I need to go and have a shower now I've just seen that finale. I mean, it really leaves you uncomfortable, especially after the fun romp that we've had through this very kind of almost interesting callback to 1970s programming. And literally behind the scenes, they said they literally had to get out the old 1970s cameras. They had to literally rehearse the scenes over and over and over again, and they even had to get the makeup right. Like, everything needed to be perfect so that it could be photographed well in that kind of 70s style of filmmaking. And I thought that was very interesting. And of course, having Derek Jacobi star even as a voiceover in this particular episode was a very nice touch. And again, the twist is something that really throws you off guard. It's something that I literally found myself thinking, as I was watching this episode, I thought, yeah, it's an interesting idea, but where is this all going? And if a writer has you asking that question, you're in for one hell of a ride, because honestly, if it's done well, it really floors you. So my other special mention is The Devil of Christmas. And my number one will be this wasn't planned. My number one will be The Referee's a Wanker. This one's a very interesting episode because it basically, as you probably know from my Marabou Stalk Nightmare fan and from what I'm wearing, I'm a bit of a football fan. So the fact that they gave us an insight into football, but a side of football that you don't usually watch, or you're not usually privy to when you're watching the game. Usually, if you support a team, you usually hate the referees because they're so dickheadish sometimes, or they can operate on a very sheer number of biases. That can often, affect your judgment. I didn't mean to say that, they're arseholes or anything, but they can often make, moves that make you think, oh, you douche. Like, why would you do that? But yeah, it was one of those things where your emotions can get in the better of you. And I think this is a good episode because it has a lot of great moments, and I actually really just like it. It doesn't have a great twist or anything like that, and it's just a really good episode, and I just really loved it. But I'm going to take that back. I actually do want to say that my favourite episode is an episode called The Stakeout, which is about a group of police officers who are basically on a night watch looking for a particular criminal who might have had something to do with the death of one of their partners. And they want revenge. They don't want to play by the book anymore. They want to see this man dead. And it's a great episode, but it's also the 6th episode of, I think, the 3rd series. So a lot of Inside Number 9 series episode 6s tend to be kind of a mixed bag. They tend to operate, more on the supernatural spectrum. But I think what really is interesting is it manages to do it in a very interesting way, which really keeps you guessing. And I really did love the twist, even though a lot of people could probably piece it together. It is one of those twists where I felt like, bravo, Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton. I thought it was a really good introduction to the series. All these things, they're not necessarily the gold standard or anything like that of Inside Number 9, but I just think these are the ones that I personally really enjoyed and really liked the look of and really wanted to, hear a lot of people's thoughts on. But there's a ton of other ones, and I'm sure if you're looking at the comments, you can, write your own episode choices. But yeah, this is my list of 5 episodes for Inside Number 9. I could have done 9, but I just kind of found myself going through all the episodes and thinking to myself, oh, I don't really know if I could do a 9, even though a lot of people will probably do a number 9 because it's obviously number 9. But I really like this series, and I recommend this series to anybody who loves anthology horror. And if you're kind of a little bit worn out with Black Mirror and thinking to yourself, well, it's not really doing it for me anymore, I would definitely recommend something like Inside Number 9 in a heartbeat. So thank you all very much for watching, and this has been Josh with Whimsical and Interesting Muses. Take care, bye.